Do you see a similar shift in our society politically almost?
Well, I mean, look at recruiting and retention right now. I mean, something's going on.
Yeah, I guess where there's a shift to where it's like party above individual for a lot of people, not for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I call it divisionism. You know, it's these leaders, institutional leaders, who we have traditionally looked to hold the line and be stewards of democracy, stewards of freedom, stewards of the free market. Now what they're doing is they're playing to these in-groups, you know, for short-term agenda and short-term outcomes, and like dividing us intentionally. And that's in politics, it's in news. You see it in a lot of places. It's intentional division. Yeah. And it's fomenting instability across the broader populations to advance one group over another.
Yeah.
And that in its purest form is tribal dynamics. That's what tribes do.
Yeah. I mean, I see as things start to shift, you know, that being more and more prominent, where it's kind of a mix of that and like a gangbanger Crips versus Blood mentality of, you know, there's like I'd rather see everything go down the shitter, but us get the W and take credit for it, you know, rather than stick my ego in my back pocket and just make sure that the country wins. It's like,
I agree, man. I think it's well said.
That, and there's this strange, like head in the sand when it comes to not holding our own side. I say own, like I'm not on a side. For a lot of, for most, I think, people who are hardline politically associated or affiliated with either party, they're not willing to hold their own guy or side to the same level of accountability that they will the other side.
It's such intellectual dishonesty. You know, like a lot of what I talk about in my leadership stuff is around human connection. And it's about the erosion of trust at a high level, and how we're basically reverting back to like shadow tribalism.
Yeah.
Because of fear-based behavior, perceived resource scarcity, a range of other factors. But when that happens, what we do is we slide back into kind of a primal state. And, you know, you talk to leaders about that, and they'll say something like, yeah, you know, you're absolutely right. Especially those fucking Democrats or those fucking Republicans. And you're like, dude, you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
You're doing it. You're demonstrating what I'm talking. You are the example. Yeah. And it's intellectually dishonest. But Sebastian Junger actually characterizes this very well in his book, Tribe. And he says, you know, he goes, for veterans coming home from war, every single one of them almost knows are willing to die for their country. But very few of them know how to live for it. And it's hard to live for a country that is tearing itself apart along every imaginable line. You know, and in so many ways, the stuff that we fought for over there to keep over there is actually manifesting right here at home.
Yeah.
And our leaders, in many cases, institutionally, are fomenting it, and we're giving them a pass.
Yeah.
Because it's my guy.
Right. Well, and I think it's not just on the politics side either. I see that, you know, pretty heavily involved with our own military. Yep. I'll use air quotes, leaders, because they're really not. I mean, I'm curious to get your take. I've talked with a number of guests on General Milley and Lloyd Austin. Like, I think both of them are fucking terrible. And I see guys like that doing the things that they're doing, adhering to policies that they're adhering to, coming up with things, you know, and you know, castrating so many fucking good mid-level leaders in our military for the dumbest shit. And I just think like this is unfolding in front of our eyes, the Greek Empire or the Roman Empire fucking just collapsing, you know, because of the dumb shit that our own political and military leaders are doing to ourselves.
Yeah, you know, when Afghanistan collapsed, for me, it was the culmination of a careerist, bureaucratic, political and military leadership structure that had just crossed the final line for me. You know, and for a lot of us, a lot of the NCOs and officers that I stay in touch with. But you know, when that happened, you know, there were a lot of veterans who saw the abandonment of our allies, the commandos, the special forces, the Cas Tejas, as unacceptable. We're just not going to leave a partner on the field like that. And these different groups stepped forward to try to help them. But what was so disgusting to me, and still is, and when I testified to Congress to the House Foreign Affairs Committee a couple weeks ago, I said this in my remarks, and my Christmas card reception list from Fort Bragg has gone way down since then. But I said,
It's a positive.
Yeah, I'll take it. That not one single senior officer or senior enlisted advisor threw their rank on the table when that happened.
Yeah,
not one.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I've had guests on that have kind of defended those guys, specifically Milley. Like, he's a Joint Chiefs, right? He's the guy. He's the go-between. And to me, it's like, wow, no, his advice and his counsel was all to do this, this, and this, and it just wasn't followed. It's like, he still works for that fucking douchebag.
Yeah.
So to me, like, I don't give a fuck. Like, there has to come a point, and he's way the fuck past that.
Yeah.
Of taking his shit off and setting it on the ground and say, if you're not going to fucking listen to me, I'm not going to be part of this fucking abortion.
Right.
And he didn't do that.
No.
And
again, look, there's a lot of folks have said similar things to me. Folks close to General Milley said, well, do you want general officers to, resign or throw their stars down every time they disagree with a political decision? And my response was, if it is morally wrong, yes.
Yeah.
Because that's what we were trained to do.
Yeah.
That's what we were trained to stand up against. And we were held to account for that for years. And yet when the time came, the largest systemic abandonment of our allies in history, and not one special ops leader or senior military leader publicly took a stand on that.
Yeah.
And then, to make it worse, many of them were placing phone calls under the table on their cell phones to groups like ours, asking us to get their guy out.
Yeah.
And that just, to me, adds fuel to the flame of a moral injury that is already pretty prolific.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, like, I would rebut that comment, on top of what you already said, of say, well, is there a fucking scenario where you would?
Right.
Like, at what point?
Yeah, when would you?
Yeah, like, there has to be a line somewhere.
Yeah.
So where is that fucking line? Do you even know?
Yeah. And, for me, I look at my journey personally on it. I retired from the Army in 2013. And at the time, I had been selected for battalion command. In fact, I'd been selected for 3 battalion commands, and I turned them all down. And the last one I turned down were prejudiced because of how we left Afghanistan villagers in a lurch in 2012 to be hunted down, similar to what happened in 2021. And because of the very careerism that you had described, like, I just couldn't do it anymore, And so I made a decision, not in a spectacular public way, but I hung it up, turned down command, and you know what? I'm fine with that to this day. I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
But when I look at the level of abandonment and moral injury that it came from, I mean, there's a poll out right now that says that something like 73% of Afghan war veterans feel betrayed by the way we left that country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
and that's astounding.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Iraq was the same thing, just on a smaller scale.
Yep.
But the travesty was the exact same.
The Kurds.
Yeah, I mean, just and the people in general. It's like, for 15 years, 13, 14 years, you've got a society that has largely supported and enabled us to do what we need to do there. And then you just fucking leave and let this group of just fucking savages come in and just do whatever the fuck they want and take everything. I mean, same thing with all the gear. I mean, them rolling around in Oakley fucking tan boots and driving fucking Humvees. I mean, it's just like...
And then act like it never happened.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Is
the fuck were we there for
just
then?
Act like it never happened. And, we gave our whole youth to this war, man. And I actually had a general officer say to a room of soft veterans at a banquet, you guys keep talking about betrayal. Stop doing that. It makes you look like victims. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, these are the very people who are actively trying to help these guys get safe passage, paying for safe houses, paying for babies to be born, using their kids' college fund to pay for medical supplies, for humanitarian relief to guys that were alive because of them.
Yeah.
And to even insinuate that our generation of guys who stepped into the breach and were not good with the way this went down and tried to do something on their own. It's astounding to me. It's so tone deaf.
Yeah.
And there's such just a chasm between the leaders and the led from this 20-year war. And I honestly think that is going to have to, going back to your original question of, is there an aspect of this in our own civil society? I think there is. And the military leadership needs to figure this shit out, or they're going to see a widening problem with recruiting and retention.
Yeah.
And national security that's not going to, and force readiness that's not going to get any better.
Yeah. I mean, it's been my experience, and I'm curious if you see the same thing, especially coming from the officer side. I mean, I was always enlisted. But one of the things that myself and I would say largely all of the guys that, that I worked with, operated with, et cetera, all had a pretty similar perspective, which was from the leadership side is that the guys that you would want progressing in rank were always guys that didn't care about it.
Yeah.
Like they cared about the boys, they cared about the job, the mission, and making sure that all of that was a cohesive thing getting done, that the guys were taken care of, the job was getting taken care of, the mission was being accomplished. If they checked this fucking hazmat driver box and this fucking leadership course box, they didn't give a fuck. And the problem is that, so those guys that were actually the best guys to lead on paper were being outshined by these spineless fucking dorks that made sure that, okay, I've got this box checked and I've done this and I've done that. And they're fucking horrible leaders. The guys have no goddamn respect for them, but they're just flying up the fucking chain because they have all of the administrative bullshit handled. And so you get to this weird, middle of the road from a rank structure standpoint in the officers. Again, this is in the enlisted guys looking outside in, but that's what it seemed like, is that, guys would get to 04, 05 and would get railroaded the fuck out by these spineless fucking jellyfish that had, one rank above them, but were fucking losers that nobody liked, that couldn't lead their own fucking dick out of a wet paper bag. And so now 20 years later, you've got this super retarded fucking top heavy pyramid of asshole leaders that don't have a fucking clue what they're doing and are totally disconnected from everybody else.
Yeah, I think it's manifested, and you're seeing it. You're seeing 20 years plus of that shit. And, one of the things that has been good coming out of the Afghanistan abandonment is I've reconnected in so many ways with guys that are still in, right? Junior officers and NCOs who were devastated by the way we left there and were and still are involved in helping their allies. And so you talk to these guys, and the atmospherics that I'm getting from them, Mike, on the leadership climate and their view. I mean, for example, captains in SF are leaving in droves.
Yeah.
They don't want to stick around. They don't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And then you got senior officers scratching their head going, I don't understand what's going on. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's why.
It's it's right in front of you.
Yeah.
And again, if there's not some kind of acknowledgement at the senior leader levels about what happened in Afghanistan, about the way it went down, some kind of accountability and personal responsibility around this thing, to the veteran community, the guys that carried the rucksacks through this war, I don't think they're going to be able to pull this back. I think it's going to continue to degrade. There's just not, you don't get a mulligan over shit like this.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But I don't mean to be a pessimist, but I don't have a lot of hope for them doing that, because to me it's kind of like asking the House of Representatives to do the same thing. Yeah. It's like, hey, stop with all the good deal bullshit. Hey, term limits and no insider fucking secrets and what. It's like asking the fox to audit himself in the hen house. Like they're not going to do it, because then they're getting rid of their good deal. And every one of those dickbags have spent 25, 30 years building one fucking, Jenga block at a time to get to where they're at, and they'd have to fucking knock it all down basically by saying, yeah, we were fucking wrong. And I just, none of them are men that way.
Yeah, and, asking any organization in D.C. to police itself.
Yeah, it's lost fucking cause. Yeah.